The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Trincha Pesa. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
Tonight on Pia.
Many cities around the world are multicultural, Ken would say. But what makes those cities in Canada, like Vancouver and Toronto, so wonderful is that multicultural is individual communities all around each other. Multicultural is each community participating in each other's lives and each other's community, and people who are not a part of those communities participating in those. And those new communities defining what Canada is and progressing the country. And that's what Vancouver does so well.
This is going to be fun. Welcome. Tonight we're taking the pulse of West Coast culture, analyzing its evolution, and diagnosing what's good and what's not so good about the way we are. The 2010 Vancouver Whistler Olympics certainly did a lot for our collective self-esteem. Our little village at the edge of the rainforest, as a journalist once described us, was all of a sudden at the forefront of the world's awareness. And our great good looks made us international superstars on the TV screens. Certainly, a good time was had by all. But being in the spotlight is a here today, gone tomorrow kind of a thing. So, we decided to take a closer look at how Vancouver is regarded by its denizens and its visitors. We began our survey by traveling the Sea to Sky Highway to attend the 10th anniversary Whistler Film Festival. After all, the film industry has been a fantastic economic generator over the past several decades. But with the American economic crisis and the rising loonie, we've lost a lot of international productions. So we wanted to know, what is the current state of the West Coast film industry?
People want to come to Vancouver. So initially we were a destination for American films coming up who were looking to take advantage of incentives or a low Canadian dollar to come, and to escape costs in Los Angeles. So Vancouver was always a sought-after destination. Now we've actually got real infrastructure. We're becoming a true production center that didn't exist 10 years ago.
So I started, there was maybe 2 films a year, and now look at the industry. It's grown so exponentially. Like it was like a dream when I was a teenager to be in the film business. I didn't really ever believe it was going to become this type of reality.
The film industry here has really matured, and partly because of the service industry that we have, but also to see local filmmakers from the region kind of coming up and developing strong, long-lasting careers in their own right.
I could feel like I was part of something that was growing, like I could really get my hands in it, And because it was Vancouver and we weren't Toronto, it was really an emerging industry, and it was extremely exciting to be part of it. Still is.
I don't know if our service industry will be quite as big as it once was. I don't know. My feeling is probably not, and that's for mainly economic reasons in the United States.
Both Montreal and Toronto have a culture of community that's that really hasn't in the film and television industry. That it's not the same in Vancouver. Like in Toronto, I can walk down College Street and run into Don McKellar or Bruce or any number of people in the industry, and that's just the way it is. Whereas in Vancouver, I can go years and years without actually running into a filmmaker that I may have worked with.
No, I think it's a function to a large degree of who you are lucky enough to work with, and you see how they approach problems and challenges, and you learn things from them, from directors, actors.
Right now, our Indigenous production has moved primarily to Ontario.
If you're in the non-fiction media, it's any federal stuff, national stuff is shot in Toronto, so you have to be there, right? But if you're an actor, you can come from wherever. Singers, Sarah McLachlan, right? She's from out here. Isn't Nellie Furtado from Victoria?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, we have our moments, right, all over the country.
I think it's interesting because Vancouver is such a service industry center, and so I don't know really what the percentage split is, but it's heavily in favor of international production, and domestic production in Vancouver is a small percentage of the entirety of the work. And the two of them have such different feels and such different requirements, even on the part of all of the key creatives and trades. And so I think the thing that's cool about doing independent film in Vancouver is you've been on the ground with these people for a really long time, and then you get to get in the sandbox and do your best to play and tell a story well, as opposed to sending it far afield and having feedback come from people you never get to meet.
Would I be spouting a well-worn cliche if I were to say that Vancouver is a supermodel of a city? Well, it's pretty obvious that we have a lot of physical glamour from our mountain, sea, and shore, our islands and forests, our Stanley Park, our seawall, etc., etc. It's almost obnoxious. I remember Vancouverites used to like to stay small and keep our beauty a deep, dark secret. We wanted to keep all this fabulous lifestyle just for ourselves. Well, that all changed when we invited the world to come to the Winter Olympics and get a good look at our good looks.
When you're born and raised in an urban center, and being from Toronto, I'm raised in a vertical city, right? I've got a city that's on top of me. When I go to Vancouver, it's not a city that's on top of you, it's a city that's a little bit more spread out. And it's not a completely horizontal city, but it's a mix of that. So I get to enjoy the urban experience and not feel like I'm in the same spot.
I don't know if it's the greatest place on earth, but it's definitely one of the greatest places in Canada. I mean, I've lived all over Canada, and Vancouver and British Columbia has so much to offer.
Well, I don't know about the best place on earth, but it's pretty close.
To me, it's always been the best place on earth. Seriously.
Mountains, ocean, serenity now. Hustle and bustle.
Vancouver is beautiful. Yeah, I mean, come on, you have to love Vancouver. There isn't, you know, weather-wise, it's Hawaii of Canada for sure.
We live in paradise here, and probably the more people that live here that can realize that, I tell you, the happier you'll be.
Vancouver is one of the most beautiful places in the world to live. I'm born and raised here, traveled a lot, always look forward to coming home.
If you want snow, we can give you snow. If you want water, we can give you water. You want mountains, you want deserts, we got it all. We have everything.
It's so beautiful. It's like we walking into a restaurant and there's 50,000 kinds of ice cream. And after a while you go, I just can't pick. So it's so like you go anywhere and everything's beautiful.
I mean, you have mountains and you have the ocean. I mean, it's green all year round. Like, come on, like what can't you like about Vancouver?
I grew up in the prairies, which there's nothing, right? And I didn't like the prairies, but I must say, when I was back there, when you see something like a shed in the middle of a wheat field, you know, a dilapidated shed, and the light's coming a certain way, you want to take a picture of that because it's so stunning. Here, I never take any pictures.
I think we've got a lot of seawall and a lot of dog parks.
All the way from Kitts, all the way around into downtown and, you know, into Stanley Park. So I think all that stuff is phenomenal, and I love it. I love Granville Island. I think that was a brilliant idea.
Personally, the beaches in Vancouver would be sort of low, and they're beautiful beaches, but again, living in Nice and places like that, to me, a beach and a park for that matter, or public space needs tables and chairs and waiters and restaurants and somewhere to get a cold drink.
It's even a bad rule. I mean, you should be able to have a beer down there at the beach.
I'd love to see more Go Fishes around on the seawalls and independent sort of little restaurants and bars, and maybe redefined in terms of, you know, whether it's in a module or something, like redefining the way that we do that.
There isn't a time that I don't cross that Lionsgate Bridge and look up at those mountains and then look to the left at the ocean and go, my goodness.
You know, growing up in North Van, doing Grouse Mountain as a kid, all that skiing, all that outdoors, the forest, the Bowden Powell Trail.
I don't like downtown all the time. I like to come in and get a little bit of a booster shot of Vancouver, and then head back to you know, where you can walk down the middle of the street.
You know, Horseshoe Bay, bang, you're out on Bowen like that. If you just want to get to any simple island, you can go up to Hornby. That's amazing. You can drive up into the Okanagan and do wine country and all that. I mean, this place is the bomb.
To be able to go skiing and then go to the beach in the same day if you wanted to is just absolutely unbelievable.
I love it. That's why I'm here. Because I love Vancouver.
And now, here's our very own love affair, Patrick Maliha.
The way we are is pretty good so far. Vancouver, you've been a great city to me for the last 15 years, and for that, I thank you. Before living in Vancouver, I lived in the Middle East for a while, Thunder Bay. After that, I moved to a town called Ottawa, a town where their slogan was, "Ottawa, the town where the fun never stops," because it never starts. I had a choice, live in Montreal or live in Toronto, but then I thought to myself, really? Do I want to be a Habs fan or a Leafs fan for the rest of my life? No, thank you. I could do without that. So I moved to Vancouver, and immediately I fell in love with you, Vancouver. Vancouver, if you were a woman, I would make love to you 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and I would make you pregnant like nobody's business. You sexy, gorgeous woman with the perfect legs and that, oh, your mountains are absolutely delicious. But the one thing I have to say is this, Vancouver. Your attitude is getting a little out of control. You gotta check yourself before you wreck yourself. Honestly, at what point do you think that being the greenest city on the planet is actually going to change the planet? Do you really think that people in India and China are saying, "Did you hear? Vancouver has raised their gas prices by 10 cents a liter. Get those cars off the road. We just heard that Vancouver got a bike lane. And did you hear? SkyTrain." Vancouver, I love you. And I will always love you. I will never leave you. I will never divorce you. And I will fight any man who says anything bad about you. But Vancouver, please, could we ease up just a little? My parents are coming, and I want them to love you as much as I do. Until next time, I'm Patrick Maliha, and this has been the Maliha Minute.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Trincha Pesa.
Right here where we are right now, as everybody knows, used to be the garbage dump. And I'd park my truck here and sleep in it. We had a cabin that was 12 feet by 12 feet, right across from the ski boot, no insulation. Lived in that for a winter till it was knocked over by a friend with her car. Had an old Gothic A-frame here for a long time.
I love how it's evolved. I really do. I think that, you know, I've lived here since 1991. And I've seen it change and evolve so much.
The artists and the architects were the stars. You know, Arthur Erickson and my dad were partners. So these were the stars of Vancouver. And then it went through the 80s where the real estate agents and the stockbrokers became the stars of Vancouver. And now it's emerged into something else. So I think it's sort of this mercurial growth that's happened to the city that I find also very, very interesting.
The city has changed physically. So you now have Cole Harbour, you have Granville Island, you have you know, the old Expo lands and what they've turned into, and I think it looks great.
Used to drive down Granville Street in the 60s on my way, and the tallest building was the Sylvia Hotel, you know, and the mountains just totally hovering, and we keep putting up buildings, and there's only less mountain and less mountain that you can see over top of the building.
I probably get irritated by the same things everybody else does. The road systems, you know, why are our highways so small? Why are they labeled so badly? You know, little things like that, that I just think, you know, this seems common sense. You're going to expand it by 1 lane. How about 2? Because we know we're growing, you know.
If you've been in Seattle where they did slice the city up with the freeway and you say, well, I remember years ago, you know, taking family down there visiting from England or whatever, and with my dad, and, you know, they know even less, obviously, about the city than I do, and we're trying to get to a restaurant. I say, oh, for breakfast. Well, there it is. We got to get there. But the freeway is intersecting us and the restaurant. And it was so complicated to get around, and I really am thankful that that's not the way they went.
I think that you get to some of the bigger cities and you know, you can jump on, in England, jump on the tube. It's so easy, it's accessible. Everybody takes the train, everybody, you know, and here I don't find it's as consistent. There's something about it that we haven't figured out yet. I don't know what it is.
I love the Canada line. We take the Canada line from Richmond back and forward. It's a fabulous way to get back and forward.
I've been along for the ride of Vancouver. The evolution of our restaurant scene, the evolution of our social consciousness.
Expo 86 changed this forever. It evolved us into another city at that moment. I felt like that brought the world here, and they saw our ocean and the mountains and how gorgeous and pleasant it is here. Now it's cosmopolitan, there's great restaurants, it's off the hook.
When I first arrived in Vancouver as a little girl, the predominant population was definitely European immigrants or their descendants, but the First Nations culture was just as predominant then as it is now, relatively speaking. As a little girl, I was fascinated by the Aboriginal culture, which of course has always been at the very core of our West Coast sensibility. The Chinese were also deeply embedded in our culture for several generations since the building of the railroad. There was a Japanese community and an Indo community, but all these groups had experienced institutional prejudice along the way. This demographic was the basis for what was to come, the multicultural city, with its commitment to human rights and equality. With the growth of these communities and new communities from the far reaches of the world, Vancouver has definitely taken on an international sophistication.
I'm a very proud Vancouverite, and I believe that our culture and our society here is very unique. Demographically, we're unique to begin with. Compared to all the other cities in Canada.
U.S. has a very strong, you know, we know who we are and we know who we stand for. Canada's always been that, come on in, you know, have a good time, it's Canada. You know, it doesn't matter. And I think that's a great thing to have, and at the same time has left us with what is our culture?
The more multicultural a city is, the more tolerant it is. That's what I believe.
When I walk into a grocery store that's a major chain in Vancouver and nobody speaks English. I mean, nobody spoke English. And I thought, I know I'm in, you know, a cultural area, but really? Because I'm in BC. That scared me. That scared me a lot.
I think the multicultural has been good. I think it's loosened the place up quite a lot.
If I go to another country, I always abide by their laws. I always abide by their rules. If their rules are religious in nature and I have to cover myself, I always do. I try to learn the language as best as I can. If I was going to live there, I would learn the language full out.
The thing that comes with living in Vancouver is I think you really need to try to get out and travel and see other cities.
I felt it harder to make friends in Vancouver than in Montreal. I don't know why. I just felt that people are a bit more reserved and it's harder to mix, you know? But to me, that was the difference between Montreal, where you go on the street, you can meet people and they're like, oh yeah, what are you doing? Or who are you? Or, you know?
It's just a very unique city and it's a very unique society.
Many cities around the world are multicultural, Ken would say. But what makes those cities in Canada, like Vancouver and Toronto, so wonderful is that multicultural is individual communities all around each other. Multicultural is each community participating in each other's lives. and each other's community, and people who are not a part of those communities participating in those, and those new communities defining what Canada is and progressing the country. And that's what Vancouver does so well.
Lots of fantastic attributes, but we seem to be ignoring those and focusing on trying to be something that we aren't.
So, in looking at the evolution of Vancouver and its current portrait, one question does come up time and time again. What about culture? You know, with all of the advantages that nature has given us, can we really say that we have created a real West Coast culture?
I just find it stunning. It's so exciting to see what's going on, you know, with the galleries in town and with our visual arts community.
You know, for people to want to live in an urban location, you know, culture is at the heart of that.
Because I'm an outdoors person in a lot of ways, I love Vancouver. As a cultural place, it's disappointing, almost because it's so good in the other respect.
I think it's always a city that's going to struggle for a cultural life, very different than Toronto, Montreal, just based on the natural wonders. Like you're competing, you know, theater competes with going sailing. Theater will compete with all the outdoor sports.
I noticed that they've been closing down a lot of music venues in Vancouver, and that worries me.
We've got lots of amazing artists here in the city, but we don't give them the exposure that they need.
The venues are, for the most part, just either too big or too small. So it feels like, you know, the culture's being squashed.
I find Vancouver just really, it's grown so much in the last 30 years. I don't know if I would suggest that it's destroying its culture so much as accidentally paving over things in pursuit of trying to figure out who it is and what it's going to be.
Seems to be more about nightclubs on Granville Street making money than let's get exciting new bands to tour through here and really, you know, encourage that.
Culture is a really, really important aspect of any kind of city. And after living through Mrs. Thatcher, who basically tried to quash that whole artistic culture in England during the 80s, I saw this massive backlash that came out, which was the punk movement and which was all these fabulous designers and artists and everything that made London wonderful. And that's all that I can hope for, that somehow this next generation are going to be fed up with the fact that they're not being recognised and they're not being given the money and the resources they need, and that they will take the city by storm. Because this city is way more than just a gold rush town money-making machine.
The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Principessa. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions.
Who will ever forget the incredible 2010 Vancouver Whistler Winter Olympics? Oh, they started off badly with the tragic death of an athlete, but somehow the Olympic spirit picked up and ran well even after that unprecedented disaster. The international press stopped writing about the downtown East Side and started reporting what was new and true. Our Winter Olympics were the best ever.
If you tell anyone, and this was even before the Olympics, when we would travel and play different places in the world, you tell anyone you're from Vancouver, everyone knows it. Whether they've been here or not, they've heard of it, they love it. They talk about how beautiful it is, how it's like Seattle, you know, mixed with Stockholm, and except it's clean, and you know, they always have this this description for it, and it's always favorable.
Watching the Olympics, I wasn't a fan of the Olympics. I didn't vote for the Olympics. I thought it was an extraordinary waste of money. I don't think that the world recognized us as this fantastic place that everybody had to move to, and that we were the greatest place on earth, or whatever we're supposed to be.
I think we're getting there. I think the Olympics helped us get there.
The lasting legacy of the Olympics, the biggest one, they all say these legacies, whether it's the speed skating rink or the ski jump up in Whistler and all these things, the biggest legacy that's happened from Vancouver is that we did that, and we did ourselves proud doing it, and we realized that we could have a good time without totaling the city.
It was, I think, quite hard to find fault. You know, it was great. We were really, it was overwhelming. I mean, I sort of planned to not be here, thinking that it wasn't, you know, going to be something that we were interested in. We wound up being away for, I think, the first 3 or 4 days, which were the ones where all the kind of negative press was being done, and well, a few negative events as well, unfortunate events. And we came back just as, you know, day 3, 4, when things started to really pick up, and it was great.
We actually started to act a little bit like adults. We actually went out there and had a great time, and it was lovely. People could go downtown and not being afraid that they were going to get, you know, in fights or covered in beer or this and that. It actually worked.
I was surprised how we handled the Olympics. I thought that, you know, the spirit in the city was, I was not looking forward to it because I had to work through it. So I was like, oh gosh, what's that going to be like for me? But it was so great. I mean, it really was. And the spirit was like crazy awesome. It was amazing. And I loved that.
I was doing the hockey movie in Toronto. And the day we won the gold medal in the men's hockey, they shut down Yonge Street for a celebration in Toronto. It was awesome.
We've done it. We've proved ourselves to the world that we're not a bunch of animals up here that, you know, can't drink, can't party without fights and the cops and that, this and that. I mean, you know, I think that's going to be the legacy. That's going to be the legacy of the Olympics for this city, is that it's made us all grow up, look at ourselves, and we're a bit confident now. We don't want to be back like viewed as hicks, you know, that can't have a good time.
So, what have we learned about the West Coast and its lifestyle? Well, I think we've heard that most people just love what we have, and also they're pretty clear about what we need to do to improve. The evolution of our city has created a model for the livable, green, urban future. Our First Nations culture has imbued us with a sense of spirituality, and our multiculturalism has created a sensual environment filled with diversity and intrigue. And then there's the old cliche. In Vancouver, you can go skiing in the morning and swimming in the afternoon. These are just some of the reasons that Vancouver always ends up in the top echelons of the world's most livable cities. Let's make sure we keep it that way. Thanks to all our guests and to you for watching. I'm Pia Shandel.
Pia would really like to know how you feel about the show. Please email us your comments at pia@thepiashow.com. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Go2 Productions. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Sprott Shaw. The Pia Show is brought to you in part by Principesa.